Good afternoon. Years ago, I was sitting across from Barbara in her office. I think it was my third or fourth visit. Barbara was a wonderful and warm human being and a brilliant therapist. And she also had a great sense of humor. I think it's really important that your therapist have a great sense of humor. Really important. Well, she was asking me about my career, and suddenly she said, well, now, Lou, you've been successful, haven't you? I mean, you've had some big jobs. You have a big job now. I said, well, I've been lucky. Mostly, I just hope that I can keep that up, that the luck holds out. Mostly, I just hope that I can pull off another success. She said, well, you know, it sounds like modesty, but I'm not buying it. She said, really, you know, there's a name for this pushback that I'm always getting from you when it comes to any of your achievements having anything to do with you or your talent. And it's called the Impostor Syndrome. So, I mean, a little kidding, I had to. I said, well, this is not a good day. This is not a good day. I knew something was off, but you're telling me I have some weird condition that has a name that sounds like the name of an Alfred Hitchcock movie? The Impostor Syndrome. Well, you know, Barbara would go on to tell me, and I knew something was important was being said anyway, and she would go on to put a name to a condition that I've been suffering with since I was a kid. And that's been over 2 decades ago. And today, my life's work is helping people call out that imposter-like thinking. Now, you can't get rid of it completely, but you can definitely learn to call it out. So back to that conversation with Barbara, I became a self-researcher from the inside out. I learned that the imposter syndrome is a feeling of phoniness and unworthiness among people when it comes to their achievements. And even though we're highly motivated, we don't really believe any of the credit that comes our way. I like to say that we feel like we have snuck in the back door of life's theater and snuck up on stage, and there's a big bouncer out there. And we know that if he sees us, we're out of here. And so we're constantly looking over our shoulder for the bouncer. It's true, Mike said, 70% of the people in this country have at least a passing acquaintance with the feelings or the symptoms that are associated with the imposter syndrome. I like to call them the Fantastic Four. And they go like this: anxiety, perfectionism, self-doubt, and fear of failure. So back to the 70%. I think that's low, don't you? I mean, that means that only 2 out of every 3 people in this room have ever experienced self-doubt, for example. I mean, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I bet if I did, I mean, almost all of us have experienced some form of self-doubt or one of the Fantastic Four in our lifetime. It's the human condition, isn't it? Even the great Maya Angelou, love her. The great Maya Angelou, after having published one of her books, said, you know, I wonder if this will be the time when they figure out I've been running a game. Maya Angelou, brilliant poet, playwright, author. And maybe you felt that way. Someone gave you some recognition and you stood and thought, uh-oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. I haven't done anything to deserve this. There has got to be a mistake. Well, people like me just have a whopper version of the feelings that go with thinking that anything that comes your way is a mistake. There's deeper worry, there's deeper anxiety, there's more suffering. So what's the cause of the imposter syndrome? Hold you in suspense a minute. One of the main reasons is growing up in a home with an alcoholic parent, or with domestic violence, or with physical abuse, or any serious conflict such as constant criticism. It's a response to the trauma that comes from that. Now, for me, it was my father. My father was a brilliant pilot, highly decorated, adored on the outside, respected. But at home, he was a raging alcoholic. At home, he berated us for being incompetent. The worst kind of abuse, I believe, is verbal. It's been the worst for my family to recover from. And this was a tortured man. I mean, he was raised the exact same way. But what I did with that is I devoted my life to proving that I was competent. And of course, it never works, because even when I brought home straight A's, he would say, well, the school you're attending must be pretty easy. So it's tempting to say that, a bad childhood is what it's about. But I've worked with people who didn't have a bad childhood, had a happy childhood, but instead they chose careers that require constant critiquing. I bet there's a good many artists in the room, and artists have to live with that, constant critiquing. I have a dear friend, Susan, and she once said to me, Lou, not until I have an entire body of work and a gallery showing do I feel like I will have deserved the right to call myself an artist. But for whatever the reason, some people just get it into their heads that they are not good enough, and that if people really knew them, that they would know that they have no right to be here. They haven't done anything to deserve to be where they are. Well, if this isn't you and you don't have this, you may know and love someone who does. You can catch them in that modesty ploy I told you about, where they shun compliments to the point of it's not modesty. They even may hide achievements from friends and family because they don't really feel like they achieved them. So, they're the folks that don't tell you they got the award. Somebody else tells you. We're also gluttons for punishment because we are attracted like bugs to the light to really high-stress jobs that wear you out because they demand too much and take everything that you've got. And for me, I worked for big broadcast companies for a long time and loved it, really loved it. But I suffered over every tiny mistake I ever made, just suffered over it, because the imposter syndrome almost always comes with painful perfectionism. I remember one night I came home from working late. I was getting into bed, and I remembered I left a little typo in a memo that I had distributed. I mean, this was before email, and I couldn't sleep. So I got back out of bed, I got dressed again, I drove back to the station, retyped it, redistributed it, got home at 2 a.m. But it was perfect, and nobody ever knew about it. Because any little flaw like that would reveal something about me and my incompetence. Well, the easiest way that I can describe to you what having the imposter syndrome is to tell you that it's like having a crappy best friend in your head who says mean things about you. And listen, I've named mine. Her name is Miss Vader, after Darth Vader. And Miss Vader says awful things. She says things like, well, you got close, but you still screwed it up. Or, you don't deserve to be here. These people are really smart. Or, yeah, you might have done it this time. I don't know how you do it next time. Well, the one good thing about Miss Vader is that once you can hear Miss Vader, once you can understand that voice, you can do something about it. That's what Barbara and I figured out. You can do something about it, and like every villain, she calls out what I like to call the radical hero. And the radical hero is wiser and doesn't buy it and has a deeper point of view. I've named her too. Her name is Betty Lou. And Betty Lou is southern and strong and irreverent, uses a smidge of profanity with Miss Vader occasionally, and absolutely has a fabulous laugh. And one of the best things that I can say about the radical hero is that she calls out the lies and the limiting beliefs that isolate people like me. I think we all could use the support of a radical hero, couldn't we? You know, let's face it, in a way, we're all imposters, aren't we? Because whether it is that tough college admission that we over-identify with, or it's that image in the media that we compare ourselves to, or having to crush every project at work in order just to be on par. It seems to me that we all are tempted to measure ourselves against someone else's idea of success. Well, my radical hero started doing the work of calling out my lies and my limiting beliefs. And one of the first things she did was look at this idea of vulnerability is weakness. You know, everybody talks a pretty good game about vulnerability. You know, it's popular to do that, but deep down, don't you kind of suspect it's for losers? See, I grew up in a military family, and there was nothing good about the word or the concept of vulnerability. You know, in wartime, that means deficiency. It means exposure for damage and imminent attack. And I grew up thinking the best thing I could do is pull myself up by my bootstraps, never ask for help, and never let them see you sweat. And I secretly believed that vulnerability was for losers. Well, in my early 30s, I had a bit of a breakdown. I wound up in the wall with physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. And I did a very rare and miraculous thing because I hadn't planned to do it that day. And what that was reaching out to my good friend Greg, my dear friend Greg. And I said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I constantly feel like I don't deserve to be here. And what we did was put together an action plan that would eventually lead me to Barbara. And do you know, I know today that the single most important thing that you can do to sustain strength in your life, you know, is to live and fail and love and ask for help. So another lie that was very important for me to call out was that a successful career leads to a successful life. Well, I mean, I grew up believing that. And for many years, I thought my career in broadcasting was going to save me. I mean, I worked so hard and I got promotions, but, you know, every time I got an achievement, it was like cotton candy, you know, really sweet blast of air and then nothing. And then you had to do it all over again, and then the sweet blast. But I believed in my job until my beloved parent company decided to sell my beloved radio station. And the way we found out about it was that we watched it on the 6 o'clock news on my sister TV station. And as you can see, I've gotten over it very well. Greg occasionally says, "Are you still holding a grudge about that?" I say, "Damn straight, that was absolutely rotten." Well, what happened was that suddenly the people that we had called family as a core value, all those people that we had held in this idea, this vision for this station that I bought into 1,000%, they were hurt. I was upset, and one day Chuck shows up. Now, Chuck is the new general manager, and Chuck wore a silk suit. Chuck told me the way things were going to go. And I heard Betty Lou say, "Good luck with that." And I walked down the hall to my office, banged out my resignation, and I was out. It was just absolutely amazing. My friends thought I was crazy. I thought I was crazy. And I don't mean to say anybody needs to quit their job. You'll have to figure that one out for yourself. But I will tell you that I had to quit mine so that I could move from a career to a calling. Another lie that was really important for me to call out was, you should never air your dirty laundry. Have you heard that one? That old saying, that old terrible saying. I grew up thinking that any past mistake or obstacle or whatever it was dirty. You better hide that thing. You better be embarrassed. It's dirty. And what I have learned today, I've done some homework on my hardships. And I've added with the hardship the wisdom that I've gained. And it's as though the fragmented pieces of me come together. And when I can tell you what my life has taught me, I am suddenly a whole person. Now, people will say, "Well, Lou, isn't it dangerous to overshare in inappropriate situations?" Well, of course it is. Common sense must prevail, and the where and when matters. But if you can help somebody, with your experience and strength, you'll know it. You'll know when. And finally, for a kid who was so shy, I never spoke up until I was about 10. This particular limiting belief was important for me to debunk, and that is this: talkers rule the world. Now, an advertising man named Barton, over 50 years ago, famously said that people who succeeded in life were talkers. Well, in high school, I had a biology teacher, Coach Tavernier. We called him Coach. I love this man. And he used to say, "I'm listening for brilliance, people." And you know what? We were brilliant in his class. We sure were. And this troubled kid was empowered by that, and I have never forgotten him or the idea of listening for brilliance. So what's at stake if we don't empower brilliance? What's at stake? Well, one thing's for sure, we won't ever tap into the best ideas from people who could solve the problems of the world. Because you see, the imposter syndrome, if left unchecked, can cause anxiety, depression, addiction, stalled projects, unfinished masterpieces, an unhappy life for sure. And it doesn't take much. It's about telling a friend, "You know, you're really good at that." Or telling a coworker, "Hey, I've noticed you're gifted there." You know, I don't spend too much time with Miss Vader anymore. It still shows up. But, you know, Betty Lou is doing a pretty darn good job these days. But when Miss Vader shows up on an off day and hurls an insult at me, I take a breath, I feel compassion, and I remember what that sad, cartoonish voice sounds like. And I remember that there's plenty of work to go around, and the exact nature of that work is to help our students and our friends and our family and our coworkers confront and call out the lies and the limiting beliefs that could isolate them, and perhaps most of all, to listen for brilliance. Thank you.